What's up, everyone? Welcome to today's video. Welcome to the VGFightSchool channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So the Batman family trailer was actually dropped a few days ago, and we got to see the Belfry, we got to see the family members, their relationships, and just a few cuts from either action scenes or some familial type scenes. And it was very interesting to see this because it provided a sincere outlook as to how the writers, the narrative team, are wanting to weave this story for Gotham Knights. But in the Belfry overall, there were a few things that we got to see that or were revealed to us in a sense that we glossed over. So one of our really huge audience members and someone who's on Twitter actively updating the community, Pablo, pretty much posted some photos, and here is one of Black Canary. Now, this is pretty interesting because there are theories that are actually going out surrounding this. I've seen one for a potential Justice League game. I didn't necessarily know if anybody was going to stake their bets on a Black Canary game. But what I think is more than likely missing is for someone to actually talk about one of the obvious things, and that is a Green Arrow game. Now, we know, depending on the universe you're actually following, depending on the storylines you're going with, Black Canary and Green Arrow are actually married in the Injustice series. If you look at the Injustice 2 game, you do see that there's actually a relationship between both of them. And I think that there's a likelihood that we get to see a Green Arrow game. Now, this is just speculation, but I think it's an avenue that hasn't necessarily been explored that I've seen anyways. And I think this is basically something that here in the community will be very interested in actually, in a sense, picking over. Now, about a few years ago, so about January of 2020, I went ahead and I made a video and I talked about this particular phenomenon. I thought a Green Arrow game would be something that would really resonate with the community of gamers. One really cool thing that we've got to see is we got to see a lot of Batman games. Batman really did take over a lot of the conversation when it came to discussing and when it came to superhero games. Rocksteady just happened to use Batman. I'm not saying Batman was ideally the hero to have used, but, he was popular enough at that time. There was something to be said about the age and the longevity of the character. And so it made sense for, all these different video game companies to try their best to do something. But then at the end of the day, it seemed like Rocksteady got the formula correctly. Now, in my own analysis of talking about possibly getting a Green Arrow game, I discussed it from the, point of view that if you really wanted to make a Green Arrow game, you really had to dial into some of the really deep storylines that pulled fans together. One of them was Arrow season 1 through season 3 that was actually done on the CW network. I think this was one of the last good shows that was done on the CW network. In fact, they even went ahead to name some of their other TV shows the Arrowverse because that's how popular the show was. I remember watching every episode thinking to myself, this has got to be the best superhero TV show that I've seen post Batman 1996 animated series or so, and even the Superman one. And so this was very interesting to see and just admire the character from that perspective. Myself not necessarily being the biggest comic reader, it was also a very good way to get a little bit of exposure to the character and just go from there to learn and to see more about the Green Arrow himself, because the Green Arrow kind of has a very interesting story, possibly nothing that would in a sense maybe wow everyone, but he's a billionaire just like, Bruce Wayne. And if you were to maybe take a good look at his story, you get to see that, he's someone that has come a long way. And in different iterations, even with the other DC heroes, you've seen him tag team with Batman. You've even seen him tag team with Superman and against Superman, depending on what you're watching. So if you saw Smallville, the TV show, you got to see Oliver Queen maybe make his way into the Smallville universe from time to time and also deal with his own, city and his own crime issues. But they did crossovers at that time. And then eventually you got to see, depending on the Batman animated, movie that you got to see, you knew that he was actually in a coalition with Batman to deal with Superman under some really weird circumstances. So there are many aspects that you can actually dial in to change the game. Another thing that I also, pointed out was at this stage, the studios under Warner Brothers, they have a lot of clout. They have a lot of these IPs just sitting there for their grabbing. They could just go ahead and just tell their bosses like, hey man, what if we made a Green Arrow game that followed these patterns, that did all these things? I'm sure that they'll probably be getting, the green light for that if they can actually make a compelling case for the character. Now, in terms of gameplay mechanics and all, I guess we can jump into all of that, but I'm not necessarily, worried as to how they're going to pull it off. If they've already pulled off something like a Batman game, all they need to do is blend it with something like a Horizon, Zero Dawn type movement in terms of how she's able to traverse the world, Aloy, and how she's able to actually move through structures, which would mean level design, gameplay systems and all would have to go with that, particular directive. But Green Arrow is a huge combatant. One of the really cool things is, even if you don't read the comics, you'll get to see him in some really interesting, animations and even movies where he actually does some really good fighting. I think this is why I actually cited the CW version first, because there they really show kind of his transformation, where he gets trained in combat, where he gets, pushed into this place where he can now be a force to be reckoned with. And I think there's a lot of story here to be dealt with in terms of the character. Now, the question is Warner Brothers Games Montreal going to move to the single player focus after Gotham Knights and make a solid Green Arrow game or solid Green Arrow entry that goes along the likes of, say, Spider-Man and Batman? Or is it possible that they might be in a place working on a Superman game, which is also another theory that I've seen, because some conversations on Twitter cited something that basically took place on this channel where a developer confirmed that the Superman project and the Suicide Squad project from back in the day that Warner Brothers Montreal was working on were indeed, in fact, kind of canceled. So I guess we're going to just wait and see. But for now, Gotham Knights is probably on the horizons of every single person. So it'll be very interesting for us to take a look at that game, which is still over a month away in terms of its release. But I'm hoping that we get to visit this topic again and start to possibly see how they will use this universe to shadow exactly what game it is they want to make. Remember, Rocksteady was in the position where they actually shadowed Superman in regard to what it is they wanted to make as a video game, or at least they were telling us that they were going to be making a game that featured Superman. And so when we saw the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League game, a game that was actually set in the Arkhamverse, it wasn't, something that was too surprising in a sense. Now, we did think they were going to make a Superman game overall, but I guess they want to tell a story differently and still set it in a universe. I'm hoping Warner Brothers Montreal is able to do that when the time comes along. So that's pretty much my own analysis based on this small snippet that they put out there. And I wanted to just make sure that, we focused on Gotham Knights. And then when Gotham Knights finally releases, we'll possibly start to, go ahead and check on all of that. But thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate you guys' time and audience. And hopefully we'll talk pretty soon. Peace out.